Don't let making sandwich bread at home intimidate you. Store-bought breads have so many unnecessary ingredients. This bread costs a fraction of the price, it's soft, it's fluffy, and it's absolutely delicious. The best part is it's so easy to make. Join me in the kitchen so I can give you a quick tutorial. The first step to making this bread is to activate the yeast. By activating the yeast, the dough will be able to rise a lot quicker, and that way it won't take so long for us to make this bread loaf. Now, yeast really thrives in a warm environment and it eats sugar. So we will be warming up this milk along with 2 tablespoons of butter. I actually just pulled this butter out of the freezer. I didn't have any soft butter yet. So I'll just take a second to open it up and hopefully be able to cut 2 tablespoons out of this. It is very frozen though and hard to cut into. Nevertheless, I figure it out. It just took a bit of extra time. I cut off 2 pieces that look like 2 tablespoons to me. And you don't have to be super accurate with the butter. What's more important is the consistency of the dough in the end, and I will guide you through that process. Although I have made this bread so many times, I often refer back to the recipe because I have a habit of omitting one of the ingredients, which then leaves me less than satisfied with the final product. Now that I found everything, let's start putting the dough together. I quickly popped the milk and butter into the microwave to warm it. Now I'm just making sure that the butter is totally melted, and then I will add this to the bowl. You also need to make sure that the milk is not too hot. Anything above 110 degrees will kill the yeast, so just touch it and make sure that it's not super hot. Let's add this to the bowl. Next, I add half a cup of warm water. I just use the same measuring cup. I have well water, so I take it directly from the tap. But if you're using city water, you may want to let it sit on the counter for a couple hours because that way the chlorine will evaporate and potentially chlorine can react poorly with the yeast and not have it rise or the dough rise quite as easily. Next, I will add some yeast. So this is just dry active yeast that I'm adding. I have a tablespoon there. Then the final ingredient for this first step is some honey. I'm actually running low on honey here. This is some nice unpasteurized honey that I have. I will add 2 tablespoons, but I will struggle a bit to get those 2 tablespoons out. If you wanted to skip these steps of activating the yeast, you could actually use instant yeast. I personally prefer to use dry active yeast just because for a lot of my recipes, they tend to be overnight bread recipes. I also buy big packages of dry active yeast and I keep it in the freezer and continuously refill a mason jar as need be. So once I have all those ingredients in the bowl, let's stir it up a bit, make sure that all the yeast has been moistened, and then we will let it sit for about 10 minutes. You can see in the time lapse here that it is slowly foaming. Once you see that the yeast is foamy, it indicates that it is alive and we are ready to move on to the next step. I will add 3.5 to 4 cups of flour. I'm not weighing this out here. I'm just doing a rough measurement and I'm actually using quite large cups there. When it comes to bread making, there is a lot of margin for error and it's actually very versatile and flexible. The more bread you make and the more dough you deal with, the more familiar you'll become with the texture that you're looking for and the smoothness that it requires for it to rise appropriately. I added about 2 tablespoons of salt and now I'm going to mix this all together. I am using a Danish whisk here, but if you do not have one, you can use a wooden spatula or a wooden spoon. As you can see, the dough is starting to look quite sticky. The flour has just been lightly moistened, but it's not fully incorporated yet. So what I did is I just wet my fingers quick so I could take the rest of the dough off the whisk. Now, having wet fingers allows the dough not to stick to my hands because if they weren't wet there, it would have all stuck. And now I'm just going to knead this a bit by hand and try to mix it all together so that it forms more of a rough ball. I'm turning what looked like a shaggy dough into now more of a smooth dough ball. I added a bit of dough because I found it to be a bit too wet. You see on the counter I have some extra flour that I'll use to sprinkle under the dough as well as on top and around on my hands so that it doesn't stick. I also put some flour in the bowl there and it allows me to get all the last little dough bits out. We will knead this dough ever so slightly. It's not a long kneading process like some doughs, but it will help to speed up the process so that it rises quicker, so that the bread will be ready in a short time. Kneading is not difficult. Just use the palm of your hand. Make sure they're well floured so that it doesn't stick. And just keep sort of turning the dough in half and pushing on it. It is honestly a relaxing process. I enjoy kneading the dough. It allows me to feel the dough myself, and it is how I have familiarized myself with different dough textures. When I started kneading the dough, it was a very rough texture. It was not soft at all. It was a little grainy. And now the more that I knead it, the softer that it gets, the smoother it is. And that's how I will know when it's ready to be transferred back to the bowl. So it didn't take me long at all. I'm just forming it into a nice ball here. It's nice and soft and smooth. And then I will put it back in the same bowl so that it can go for its first rise. I put a lid on that bowl and I will leave it on my stove. The reason for that is because my stove tends to be one of the hotter areas in my kitchen. Sometimes to speed it up even more, I will turn on the oven so that the air vent has warm air coming out of it, which will help it rise even quicker. After about 15 minutes, it should have plumped up nicely. It's time to shape the dough. I just took it out, flattened it into somewhat of a rectangle, folded two sides in, and then rolled it. I quickly sprayed the pan with avocado oil, and then I placed the dough in the pan. I will now place a dish towel on top of it and give it about 15-20 minutes for its second rise. Now, I'm putting it back on top of my stove because it's a lot hotter there and it will rise quicker. I'm trying to do this very quick because we need the bread for dinner. So as you see, the dough comes up about an inch past the top of the dish, and that's when you know it has risen enough. I melted some butter here, about 1 to 2 tablespoons, and I'm just going to brush it on top of the bread dough. I want to make sure to use all this butter because it has nice, delicious flavor. I also find this to be one of the most satisfying steps, so I try not to rush it. This white bread honestly ends up looking just like store-bought bread, but tastes 100 times better. It can be used for anything you would normally use any store-bought bread for. You can make club sandwiches, you can have toast and jam. My daughter loves to have grilled cheeses on this bread. I'm going to pop it in the oven now. So my oven was actually set a little high initially, but I do turn it down to 350, and it should take about 30 to 40 minutes to cook. You should check bread with a thermometer though. I recommend getting a digital thermometer, and it should be about 200 to 205 degrees. Then you know it's ready. So you pull it out of the oven and let it sit in the pan just for a couple minutes so it can cool ever so slightly. And then you want to plop it out of the pan there. It should easily release from the pan and look nice and golden. If you choose to cut into this bread before it is fully cooled, please be careful with it because bread can easily deflate. I'm using a bread knife here and it cuts through it very smoothly. And as you can see from the inside, it is nice and fluffy and airy. It's not dense at all. It has a nice sweet buttery smell to it. The crust is not too hard. It's soft and easy to cut into. I like that I can cut the size pieces that I would like and that suits my family best. Here's what the final product looked like, and last step is to give it a try. Although I normally like to put some butter on this, my butter is still frozen, so I'll give it a test. It has a hint of sweetness, it's nice and salty, it's soft and airy, and it's absolutely delicious.